Good evening and welcome to an all new episode of Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem. And it's been a while. The month of October has been pretty busy for us. We went to Gatlinburg at the beginning of the month. We had a really good time. The leaves were beautiful, and I really think the highlight of that trip was we got to finally see a bear. In all of our mountain trips, we have never seen a real bear other than the stuffed ones and then the wooden ones they have in Cherokee. But every evening there was a bear that would come out to the creek behind our hotel, and we found out from the hotel manager that she's actually pregnant. So we're kind of hoping to go back in the spring and maybe she'll bring her babies out to the creek too. But when we were leaving on that Sunday, we could see like this a huge plume of smoke, and we found out later that it was the massive fire that took out several businesses, and it actually killed somebody. But that was kind of heartbreaking to know that it was going on. But our trip to the mountains was great. And then this month I also got to see Stevie next. That was on the 22nd in Charlotte. That was amazing. I've wanted to see her for as long as I can remember, and I finally got to see her. And I went with my daughter Courtney and my son-in-law Justin, and we had a really good time. I have paid for it since we got back because it was a lot of walking, and this fat old girl is not used to doing all that walking. But yeah, so that's something I need to work on. And then this past weekend was when my little town does the trick or treating, and that was fun. The little kids were just great. We gave out like over 600 pieces of candy in like an hour and a half. So and that was like giving each kid one piece. So if that tells you the amount of kids that hits my street, that's a lot of kids. But anyway, so now it's time to get back to the podcast, back to the normal routine of everything, putting out new episodes and that type of thing. And earlier today, you may have noticed that I did a couple of Halloween throwbacks, and I hope you enjoyed those. But now we're moving on to an all new episode, and it's not really Halloween related, but it's the story of Chris Watts and how he murdered his precious family. So stick around and listen out for that with me, and hang around.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
Chris,
I know.
Chris, stop. It's time. Just stop for a minute. Take a deep breath. I want you to take a deep breath right now.
What you've just heard is audio from police interrogation with Chris Watts. But let's go back a bit and talk about the events that led up to this point. Now, first, I just want to say that this is a really hard one to talk about. It's terribly sad, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. But there are victims in this case who deserve a voice. So that's why I'm talking about this case tonight. Now, our story tonight takes place, or starts, I should say, in Colorado, here in the United States. The Watts family, by all accounts and appearances, seem to be the, air quotes, perfect American family. There's Dad Chris, he's the dad and husband. There's Shanann, she's the wife and mom. And their daughters, Bella, who is 4, and Celeste, who is 3. And like I said, it looked like they had the perfect life. And I can remember when this was an active investigation, looking at Shanann's social media, and there was picture after picture of the family on trips together, and the pictures portrayed them as a happy little family. In 2018, Shanann finds out that she's pregnant with the couple's 3rd child. It's exciting news, right? She even posted a video on social media of her telling Chris the exciting news, and she's wearing a shirt that says, "Oops, we did it again." In the video, Chris walks into the room, sees the shirt that she's wearing, and laughs and says he likes the shirt. Shanann tells him that baby number 3 is on the way, and he seems excited, but you can tell that Shanann was a bit apprehensive about telling him, and that's probably because their lives weren't as perfect as it seemed. 3 years before that video was posted, the Watts filed for bankruptcy because they were over $480,000 in debt. Now, I'm not sure if it was because of the money issues, but the couple was starting to drift further and further apart. Now, you would think that a pregnancy announcement might bring the couple back closer to each other, but it actually did the opposite. Their marriage was less than idyllic, and Chris was never abusive as far as we know, but he became very withdrawn and he was very cold from her and their marriage. Or he was cold to her, sorry about that. At one point, she even sent a text to a friend of hers saying that she was angry, sad, and scared of having a third baby with somebody who seemed like he had no interest in having another child at all. And get this, he wouldn't even go with her to her ultrasound appointments. Now, I can't even imagine having to go along to something so exciting during a pregnancy. And in June of that year, Shanann and the two girls traveled to North Carolina to visit family, and she ended up staying there for 6 weeks. And while she was there, she told her mom a little bit about what she was going through. She also bought a few self-help books for herself and for Chris, and she'd mailed them to him, but he would just toss them in the trash. He wasn't a bit interested in any kind of help. And during her time in North Carolina, Shanann sent Chris numerous text messages, but he couldn't even take the time to answer any of them. He was living what she called the bachelor life and loving it. So fast forward to that August, just after she and the kids are back in Colorado, and she's getting ready to take a work trip to Arizona. She sends a girlfriend of hers a text message that says, quote, "Chris told me last night he's scared to death about this third baby, and he's happy with just Bella and Celeste, and he doesn't want another baby." The friend responded with, quote, "He's just scared. Everything will be fine once the baby comes." Then Shanann sends back a response that says, "No, he's changed, and I don't even know who he is." At some point during that text conversation, the friend suggests that maybe Chris is having an affair, but Shanann says that she's questioned Chris about that, but he just flat out denies it. So from August the 10th to the 12th, Shanann goes on that work trip to Arizona, and Chris is at home watching the girls. Well, while she's gone on that work trip, she keeps an eye on their bank account charges. So imagine her surprise when she notices a $62 charge for dinner while she's away, and the restaurant is called the Lazy Dog Bar and Grill. Doesn't sound like somewhere you'd take little kids for dinner, right? So she asked him about it because she didn't think that was somewhere he would take the kids for dinner. She asked him about it, and he tells her that he had gotten a babysitter for the kids. He went to a Colorado Rockies game with some of his friends, and they had all gone out to dinner after the game. She wasn't buying it, though, and she told him that it just didn't make sense. And that was on a Saturday. And Shanann was due back during the late hours of the following evening. Around 1:40 on that Monday morning, Shanann is dropped off at her home by her friend, Nicole Atkinson. And this would be the very last time anyone saw Shanann alive. Later that same morning, Chris wakes up, goes to work, and acts normal. No one at his work is seeing any red flags. Little did Chris know that Shanann was scheduled for an obstetrician appointment that day. And those are the red flags that started the ball rolling. Nicole, the friend that I just had mentioned, started getting a little suspicious when Shanann wasn't answering her text messages that morning. It just wasn't like Shanann at all. Her concerns grew when Shanann missed that doctor's appointment and grew even more when Shanann missed a business meeting. So Nicole draws to Shanann's house, and after ringing the doorbell and banging on the door, no one answers and there's no noise going on inside the house. The house was dead silent. And of course, Nicole knew something just wasn't right. She called Chris and then she called the local police department. The police department sent an officer to do a welfare check. And Chris arrived shortly after the officer, and he gave that officer permission to search the home. But Shanann and the two little girls were nowhere to be found. But what they did find was startling. Shanann's purse, phone, and keys had all been left behind. In the driveway, Shanann's car with the kids' car seats strapped inside was still there. Everyone found this strange because Chris told them that Shanann had planned to take the kids for a play date that day. Searching further in the house, police found that the bed sheets from the couple's bed were missing, but were soon found in the trash. The following day, two things took place. The CBI gets involved, and Chris goes on television begging for his family's safe return. He tells the cameras that he has no inclination of where they were. And when a reporter asked him about what he thought about people thinking that he has something to do with his wife's and children's disappearances, Chris stutters his response a bit, but says that he wants them to know that he wants his family back. One thing of particular interest that stands out to me in the video, and keep in mind that this is the first full day after his family has gone missing, but Chris isn't wearing a wedding ring. Yeah, some guys don't wear one, but if you look at older videos and pictures on Shanann's social media, he is wearing a ring. Maybe he had just taken it off for his job, and he hadn't, put it back on, but it definitely stands out. And another thing that stood out to me is how all of his statements are pretty much self-serving. He says, "I don't like sleeping here," or "the house is empty." He's continuously talking about how he's lonely. He also talked about the kids in the past tense. For example, they were supposed to start school the following Monday. It's like he's saying they're not coming back. And I don't believe anyone was buying anything that he was trying to sell, though. It wasn't just me. The whole time he's talking to the media, police are continuing their investigation. And on the Watts doorbell camera, they find something very interesting. Not long after Shanann arrived home from the airport early that Monday morning, Chris is seen back in his truck into the garage, and it sat there for a good while before you can see Chris get back in to the truck and drive away. Well, thank goodness for GPS, because police used that GPS on Chris's truck and recreated the path that he took that morning when he drove away. And it took him all the way to Chris's work site, which is an oil field. Now, it's not so odd that he drove to work, but they searched his work site with all the resources they had, like by foot and drone. They were using drones to survey the site because it's probably a pretty good size area. And they used all that good stuff, and the drone spotted something that catches their interest. What they found was a bed sheet that matched the set that they had found in the trash back at the Watts home. Around this same time, they bring Chris in for his official interrogation, or the first official interrogation. And it was also during this time that it got a very big second break in the case. A woman named Nicole Kessinger came to the police and told them that she was Chris Watts' girlfriend. She told police that she had been a co-worker of Chris's and they had been dating all summer. He had told Nicole about his family, but he also told her that he and Shanann were separated and he was living in the basement of the family's home until the divorce was finalized. I mean, how many times have we all heard that story? But anyway, she told the media that she barely knew Chris, but when police investigators started looking into text messages between her and Chris in her internet search history, it was a totally different story. At one point during the summer, Nicole was searching for over 2 hours on the internet for wedding dresses. She had also searched Shanann's name on the internet sometime after Shanann's disappearance, and she had searched "Can cops trace text messages?" And I should mention that she had deleted all the texts between herself and Chris before she came forward to the police. Y'all, she even Googled about the book deals that Amber Fry got. And you might remember that Amber Fry was Scott Peterson's mistress from that Lacey Peterson case. Well, this Nicole was all over the place. And for lack of better words, that was just tacky Googling to see how much she could profit after her boyfriend murdered his family. I mean, what the hell? Who does that kind of thing? Now, in the investigation, police also found handwritten notes to Nicole, and in those notes, he's telling her about how she takes his breath away. how he's going to make big things happen that year and that kind of thing. But this is the same man that couldn't even return text messages to his pregnant wife when she was all those miles away in North Carolina visiting her family. Now, all of this is taking place at the same time. The search at Chris's work site, the interrogation of Chris, and this mistress is also talking to police. All this took place at the same time. But at the work site, after that sheet was discovered, it didn't take police long to find what they were looking for. Bella's and Celeste's bodies were found dumped in oil tanks. Now, the opening on these tanks, y'all, is only like 8 inches in diameter. So he basically crammed these babies' bodies through those hatches, and Bella had scratches on her little body, and a clump of her hair had ripped from her scalp from being shoved through those openings. They had previously been smothered by Chris's bare hands. I mean, how do you do that to your kids? Shanann's body was found buried in a shallow grave. She had been strangled, and she had these finger-shaped bruises around her neck. There was nearly no sign of a struggle, so maybe she was already asleep or unconscious when the strangling took place. And there were no signs that Celeste had fought, but there were signs that little Bella had tried to fight off her dad. And of course, police had no doubt about who had done this to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. And this was done by a husband and father that was supposed to love and protect them. This was done by a man having an affair who, rather than divorcing his wife, murdered her, their unborn baby, and 2 little girls. These little precious girls loved and adored Chris, and what he did in return is just savage and brutal, and in their little short lives. Well, later that night, Chris was arrested for suspicion of murdering his wife and daughters. Shortly after his arrest, Chris asked to speak with his dad, and he told investigators that if he was allowed to speak to his dad, he would then tell them the truth. And what he had to say to his dad is just absolutely astonishing. Let's take a listen.
I went downstairs and I don't want to protect her. What? I don't want to protect her. You don't want to protect her? I don't know what else to say. What happened? Huh? She hurt him? Yeah. And then well, no, I doubt not her. You're a girl. Did they leave after that for a long time? So she started hurting the kids. Paper. Probably because what happened. One, she smelled it. Or choking. I didn't hear anything. When I was downstairs, they came back up and they were gone. I don't know, like me talking to her about that. Talking to her about separation and everything, about thinking she lost her. I don't know, like, what else to say, like, I freaked out. Those are my kids. So it's not that one time. You were leaving the to go to work. And she freaked out over the separation of everything. I think she laid back down, but that's not downstairs, but I heard like a little commotion upstairs, but I didn't think anything of it. upstairs and she was...
Never. I can see that she was not.
What, choking her? Or did she kill him?
They're blue.
Both of them.
Yeah.
She choked both of them to death.
I forgot the champagne. How was it though?
No,
I couldn't like call cops about it.
so no one could dig all the bodies off or something?
I mean, I didn't know what else to do. I didn't freak out. I didn't know nothing else to do. I didn't know what to do.
So she killed Lucy Stevie and choked him to death. You lost it and choke her or...
That's just rage. I hadn't.
Some of the audio is hard to hear in that, but basically, Chris threw Shanann under the bus. He accused her of hurting their kids, and he killed her in retaliation. He accused her of hurting those two little girls, and in reality, he had killed all three. Well, really all four, because of the unborn baby. And he just sat there and lied to his dad like that. I mean, how low can you really go? And the lying doesn't stop there, though. When the police interrogated him, he told the same story to them. He said that when Shanann got home from the airport that night, he told her that he wanted to separate, and she was very upset. And he went on to say that he went down to the basement in the family's home for like just a minute. And when he came back into their bedroom, he saw on the baby monitor that one of his daughters was laying on her bed and she had already started turning blue. When he switched the cam to the other daughter's room, he saw Shanann suffocating her. By the time he made it to that bedroom, his daughter was already dead. And at that point, he freaked out and killed Shanann, or so he says. No one but his parents was buying that line of crap. I mean, I can see how you would kind of want to believe your kid, but still, that just doesn't really add up. But anyway, I mean, I don't know what I would do in their situation. I mean, you would want to believe that your kid's not capable of something like that, but none of his story just really added up. But he stuck to this story and he held on to it until the early part of November that year, when he decided to avoid the death penalty. He decided to spare his own life. Well, at that point, Chris pled guilty to killing his wife, Shanann, two daughters, Bella and Celeste, and their unborn son, plus 2 charges for victims under the age of 12, an additional charge for unlawfully terminating a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a body. At his sentencing, Judge Marcelo Kupkow calls the murders, quote, the most inhumane and vicious crime I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen. After that, Chris was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 48 years for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 36 years for disposing of the bodies of his wife and children. He's now living out his days in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. The following year, which was 2019, he was sued by Shanann's parents in order to pay them $6 million. Now, they'll probably never see a penny from Chris, but it does prevent him from profiting in any way from the murders, like book deals, movie deals, anything like that. He can't make any money from it. And y'all get this. This is what I just do not even get. Women are constantly sending this man mail. Like, they idolize him. And how messed up is that? I just don't even get that. I mean, I'm sure he's charming like Ted Bundy, but let's face it, he's still a murderer. Now, before I wrap this up for tonight, I do want to mention that a couple weeks ago, they did announce a court date for the double murder trial for Alex Murdaugh. That trial is set to begin on January the 30th of next year, and you can bet I'm going to be following it very closely. Well, y'all, that's it for tonight. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to come back on Friday for an all new What the Friday.